So, before I get into the nuts and bolts, I just want to share that this is a topic that I know very well personally because for much of my life, I wasn't attracted to secure people. I was attracted to the emotional intensity we're going to be talking about. And later in the show, I share more about my personal story, but let's just say I went through a painful divorce when I was 30, and then I spent 14 years dating and I had a lot of learning to do, a lot of karmic relationships. It hit me really hard because those relationships were definitely there to teach me something. And as soon as that lesson was learned, the relationship disappeared. So, but today we're kind of changing the lens a little because of Little Punch and how much he has affected the world. I think all of us are looking at Little Punch and seeing ourselves, and we know from our vantage the massive consequences to him if he's not able to form a secure attachment. And we want him to so badly because he's just this innocent little baby. So, we have a lot to cover here. So let's get started with why secure love can feel unfamiliar. Many people say they want a peaceful, emotionally safe relationship, but when they encounter one, something interesting can happen. It actually does not feel exciting. And it's a shock. It's like, wait a minute, I thought this was supposed to be it. Like, this is the one. But the highs and the lows and the extremes of the nervous system aren't there. So, what is this? What is this? This type of relationship may not create the same intensity we've experienced in our past relationships. Sometimes people actually interpret the calmness as a lack of chemistry. This is very interesting. But very often, what's happening is the nervous system has learned to associate love with uncertainty and emotional intensity. So when love feels calm, it can feel unfamiliar. It's just a very interesting perspective when we go back to the lens model and how the way you see the world is unique to you and how everything is reflected back to you through that lens that you are using to perceive everything. So if in your lens that you inherited and that you have also kind of built throughout life, you see and experience this intense emotion, and that is what you see as love, it's very hard to choose something different. And I think it takes a really serious wake up call to change the way you are and to attempt to have a different perspective because something happens where you realize this isn't healthy. This is not working what I'm trying to do because that kind of relationship is exhausting and you're constantly in some state of intense turmoil. So it's one thing to recognize that, but this is about really understanding why you're drawn to it. You're drawn to it because it's familiar, and familiar is the nature of things. And that's why we're worried about Punch, because if Punch finds it too comfortable and gets too familiar with his stuffed animal and with rejection, he's bullied also in the monkey enclosure. Is he ever going to be able to connect to a loving parent figure because it's so unfamiliar to him? It's like we're watching attachment theory play out with Punch. Attachment theory was originally developed by the psychologist John Bowlby, and later it was expanded by Mary Ainsworth. The research showed that our earliest relationships shape how we experience connection throughout life. In one famous experiment Mary Ainsworth did called the Strange Situation, researchers observed how infants reacted when their caregiver briefly left the room. And it became very clear that securely attached children were distressed when the parent left, but were quickly soothed when they returned. Children with the anxious attachment remained distressed even after the parent returned. So they didn't have the ability to recalibrate. And the avoidant children appeared indifferent, even though internally they were experiencing stress. So this is groundbreaking research that was done, and it shows these very distinct styles and how even these children in this experiment were right around 1 year old. Like, we're talking very, very young. And the way that their parental figures are attaching and bonding and how they're experiencing bonding with them already by that age has a significant impact on how they're interacting with the world and how they're connecting with their primary caregiver. So we look at that information and we take it out and look at a larger lens, and you see how that continues throughout life if we don't acknowledge it and do the work that we need to do to feel that secure attachment within ourselves. Those early attachments, those early patterns really become the blueprint for how we experience love. And it makes sense. It makes so much sense. It's why, back to what I said earlier, that feeling of anxiety that little baby gets when their mother is gone and they come back and they're really anxious, they're not able to settle down. The little baby starts experiencing that feeling of anxiety as what is love. The baby starts thinking this is what it feels like because they're learning that from their mother or from their parents. So it just gives that deeper perspective of what this really is about. And it means that our nervous systems begin to associate certain patterns with connection. So also, in another way, if that remains within us, that extremely important attachment period, when we're navigating life as teenagers or as young adults or even as older adults, we can be drawn to people who energetically mimic that parent because that is what we know, that is familiar. So we can be drawn to that person who's going to bring out that anxious attachment inside of us because that's what we do. And we actually feel at home with that connection, even though it's extremely painful and it's exhausting on top of it. We can't help it. We're drawn to what we know. So if we look at this through another lens, there's another interesting layer here. Our nervous system can sometimes confuse stress with attraction. In early stage romantic attraction, the brain releases dopamine, and that activates reward circuits similar to those involved with addiction. That really reminds me of the book that just came out last year by Elizabeth Gilbert called All the Way to the River. But she really clearly describes what that is, a love addiction, and how it's so excruciating. It's the dopamine. It's the same thing as a drug addict or an alcoholic, any addict. It's incredibly strong, the dopamine hit that you get addicted to, because in her nervous system, she describes in the book, it gives her an incredible high, and then she just wants more and more and more of that. And she said she can use people then just to achieve that feeling that she's wanting. She wants to connect and get that hit. Looking back now, I can see how many of my own relationships were driven by that same cycle. And also, anthropologist Helen Fisher has studied this extensively. And she says the early rush of romantic intensity can feel incredibly powerful. And I think most of us can relate to that, especially when you're young, like that feeling is overwhelming. But the long-term secure love operates on a different chemistry because a secure attachment is associated more with oxytocin and emotional bonding, which feels calmer and more stable. So when someone is used to dramatic highs and lows, the dopamine, a healthy relationship may feel boring, but in reality, it's more regulated. So we're going into new territory here, looking at relationships in a very new way. So let's take a look at what secure attachment feels like. First, it feels safe. You feel safe expressing yourself, your thoughts, your fears, and needs without fearing punishment or withdrawal. Second, consistency. A secure partner is reliable, consistent. Brene Brown says trust is built in very small moments. So it's about showing up over and over and over again. And third, the key factor is curiosity instead of defensiveness. So when there is a conflict, the secure partner can become more curious and wanting to understand what's going on, what's wrong, versus becoming defensive. Because when the defensiveness kicks in, it's more like a battle. You can't really connect. So being able to be curious is really wonderful, is actually very healthy. And relationship researcher John Gottman explains that healthy couples aren't the ones who avoid conflict, they just know how to repair it well. And also, again, the feeling of calm. You don't feel like you're decoding the relationship. You don't have to analyze it. Things are just steady, stable, safe. And you feel secure enough to be able to grow, to be able to be yourself, to be curious about yourself, to be able to ask questions about things, to be able to explore, expand. That you could do that within the security of this attachment. And this is really the lens shift in today's conversation. So, my personal story I want to share. I understand this dynamic very well, as I mentioned earlier. And the reason why is because for most of my life, I was drawn to emotionally unavailable or avoidant partners. And at the time, I experienced that intensity as chemistry. And then without fail, these relationships would burn out because it's not sustainable and it's not connecting to a deeper level. It's not secure. It's just a dopamine circus. So at the time, I didn't realize this, but I wasn't attracted to secure love because it was so unfamiliar. And the reason why is because when I was very young, my parents were very young when I was born, and my father was an addict. He was an alcoholic, and he left the family when I was 2. And so my nervous system from a very, very young child was affected by his inability to connect. And that is what I got used to and comfortable with. And that was what I was too. I had this avoidance inside of me, and I was attracting avoidant people. And it could be very intense, but in the end of the day, I was just repeating the dynamic over and over. And it wasn't until I really hit the wall and started to do deeper inner work that I really had to look honestly at my patterns and through my lens that things began to shift. Because through different techniques I was working through with awareness and truly mindfulness, emotional awareness, accountability, day to day, minute to minute, that's the only way it became possible for me to experience a different kind of love, something that was calmer and safer and more fulfilling. But this was something I had to work on. And I think I had to find the energy of secure attachment within myself, which is possible to do, to clear out and start to regulate the system and calm it down and become secure within, and then attracting a secure relationship and a secure attachment. So the encouraging news is that attachment patterns are not permanent. This is the best news ever. And because of neuroplasticity, which is the knowing that our brains are capable of change throughout our lives, that is a secret to our being able to heal whatever attachment we already have. And we know now through research that through self-awareness and emotional work and healthier relational experiences, it is possible to move toward secure attachment. So this is the best news. And the process begins internally. So as we develop that stronger sense of security within, then we can really see the difference when we're out there in the world and we're dating and we're meeting people. We can see it, we can sense it. This is insecure, this is avoidant, this is anxious, or this is a secure person, and I can tell. I can tell because of the way they behave, how they show up, and how I feel the energy with them. It's a different feeling, and you become aware and you can choose differently. So if you're listening and this is touching a nerve with you, I just want to ask you a few questions to reflect on in your own life as you're looking at your own attachment patterns. First, do you feel calm in your relationship, or are you constantly anxious? Next, can you express your needs openly? And when conflict happens, are you able to repair and reconnect? Because the healthiest love, it's the one where both people feel safe enough to grow. And that last question reminds me again of the first thing I shared about the research that Mary Ainsworth did. That when there was distress with a little secure baby, and when the parent came back, when the mother came back, the baby was able to reconnect. So this is the same idea as adults, is when there is stress, can you reconnect? That means you have secure attachment. So you can have a bad moment, you can have a disagreement, but you're able to come back to each other and reconnect. And you're able to express your needs openly too. So you're able to feel, you're able to express. These are all really wonderful. This is to me like a gold mine of information that can really help in all areas of life. Relationships aren't just romantic. In all relationships, the goal for me, after what I've experienced, and my wish is to be able to have secure attachments to the people who are really close to me. So I live with that feeling inside of security and connection. So, what do you think? I hope you found this conversation interesting. I know I did. Thank you.